Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick. Thank you so much for being here. We are ready for a great weekend. In fact, I hope we are the start of wonderful things to come for you this weekend as we launch another episode of Fancounters. Now, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that I'm kind of revamping the show. I'm going to be adding some segments as we go along, trying to make things a little bit more entertaining, give you some celebrity news you might have missed, and much, much more. So we hope you enjoy some of the new things that we've got planned for the show, as well as great celebrity interviews every single week. We're on social media. If you go to Fancounters on Facebook, you'll find a huge group there. Our smaller, more intimate discussion happens at a Facebook group called Sharpie Nation. It's a private group. Ask to join and we will let you in. We're also on Instagram at Fancounters Live. Thanks again for joining us. Now, we have some celebrity news for you that I don't know if you've caught or not. So we're going to call this the shocking celebrity news of the week. And we are talking stalkers this week. That's right. Katy Perry is known for her amazing concerts. I went to one of them and was blown away by not only the outfit changes, but the props. The entire show is magnificent. It is something to behold. It's kind of like one of those iconic people that you want to go see live because the show just blows you away. And hopefully she'll be able to tour again post-COVID with shows that will even make that very small. But for now, Katy Perry's on American Idol, and she is also facing some courtroom drama. Katy's got an alleged stalker that was recently arrested at her home, a place where you need to, you should always feel safe at home. Even when you're a celebrity and you're out in public, we've talked about this a lot of times, it's kind of like your home should be off limits. Like their family should be off limits. And in this case, a 38-year-old crazy guy named William Terry has taken things to a whole new level. He is stalking her. He's potentially dangerous, and now she's got the restraining order to protect her. Now, TMZ released some new legal documents that shows that William Terry was posting lewd messages about Katy Perry on social media for many months that included threats directed at Orlando Bloom and others. His frightening behavior culminated with him jumping the fence at her Beverly Hills home, and then he was detained by security, which placed him under citizen's arrest. The cops came and they busted him for trespassing. But Katy Perry's not really sure that Terry's going to be put away. She fears he's going to return because he also tried to enter the property in early August, claiming that she invited him to be there. Now, looking at Terry's Twitter account dating back to December of 2019, he has tweets on there tagged active shooter, comments about killing dogs and cops. He threatens to snap Orlando Bloom's neck, and he wishes Orlando's son and his ex Miranda Kerr would catch COVID and die. Sounds like a great person, right? Yeesh. The tweets also included numerous graphic and explicit comments about Katy Perry, and Terry is believed to be homeless, so obviously attempts to serve him a restraining order could serve to be quite difficult. But the judge did grant it for Katy, Orlando, their newborn daughter, and Orlando's son. So this guy has to stay 100 yards away from all of them until he goes to a hearing next month. Hopefully he will learn his lesson, leave Katy Perry alone, and let's not pick another celebrity after that to start stalking. It's really bad when you're in your own home and you can't feel safe. Another guy that is dealing with stalkers this week is Magic Johnson. He's getting threats at his office. In fact, this stalker, who has been issuing threats and demands, recently made it past Magic Johnson's office security. So now Magic's got a court order protection against this guy. A judge granted the NBA star a temporary restraining order against a guy named Willie Frazier, who Magic Johnson says has been harassing him and his employees for years, but now things are getting much worse. Frazier started sending correspondence to Magic's personal and business addresses. He was demanding money, making wild claims that Magic stole documents about Frazier, and ultimately stole his identity. Magic Johnson stealing people's identity? I think not. That's kind of crazy. But finally in 2020, Magic says a hard line was crossed because Frazier twice came to Magic's office building. He made it past security, rode the elevator to Magic's floor, and when he couldn't get inside Magic Johnson's suite, he allegedly slipped a bizarre series of demands under the door. As you guessed it, Frazier's got a restraining order. 100 yards he must stay away from Magic Johnson and a handful of his employees. These are stories that are real. Stalkers are real and crazy. And as you've found out from this show, celebrities are real people. Just, they have a very public persona, but they want to be left alone. And so hopefully these crazy people will leave these stars alone. Our guest today served and protected the people of New York City, and now he's starring in an HBO miniseries alongside Nicole Kidman, Hugh Grant, and Donald Sutherland. This show is called The Undoing, and our guest is Michael Devine. Michael plays a detective, which is a role he's comfortable with since he's a recently retired New York City police officer. And because we just celebrated the 19th anniversary of 9/11, I'm going to ask him about what that day was like for him working as a 4-year veteran of the NYPD. Michael Devine is going to be a name to watch for some time because he's already got a packed resume. This guy starred in The Wolf of Wall Street, Law and Order, Blue Bloods, Orange is the New Black, Big Time Adolescence, and The Post. Now, besides protecting the citizens of our great country, Michael's a vocalist. He plays the bagpipes. We're not going to ask him to do that today. His 2011 vocal release, Songs of Valor and Hope, can be found on Amazon Music, and I hear he's got another project in the works, so obviously we're going to find out about that too. Now, after the interview, stay tuned for a podcast review of a podcast I listened to for years, and I think it finally has jumped the shark, and I'll tell you why after we talk with our special guest, Michael Devine, on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're gonna. Oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Michael Devine, welcome to Fancounters. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much for having me. This is exciting.
For the past several years, you have been merging your real life with a completely made-up one, starring in some high-profile television shows and movies. I want to tell you off the bat that I'm a huge supporter of our police officers. I definitely back the blue, and I can't thank you enough for your years of dedicated service to the NYPD.
Oh, that means a lot. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take us back a little bit, if you would. So you're actively working for the police department. How do you take your law enforcement career and start kind of building an acting resume that honestly would make a lot of self-starting actors jealous?
Well, I was an actor first. It's what I've always wanted to be. The law enforcement thing came a bit later. I was focused on acting right from the gate, like so many other actors. It was school plays, and then I went to college for it. I got a degree in acting, and I was very serious about acting. And then I honestly don't know where it came from. A few years out of the gate, I just felt like maybe there was a bit of a higher call, and I come from a long line of cops. My father was a cop, my grandfather. And there must have been something in my molecular chemistry that pointed me in that direction. And, I was around 26, and I said, let me give this a try. Let me give it till I'm 30. And that was over 20 years ago. So I gave it, I put in a whole career. And, some people think that they're, polar opposites, but they actually complemented each other a lot. And there were many days where I actually had to bring my skills as an actor into the world of the police department. And then, and then I was bringing my skills from the police department into my acting career. So they both complemented each other fairly well. But more specifically, to answer your question, it was around, I guess actually it was shortly after September 11th. I sort of realized how fleeting life was. I was unfortunately involved in a lot of the cleanup. I was a first responder at the time. And I thought, I have some unfulfilled dreams. So if life is so precious, I'm going to go after it. So it was at that point I said, let me pursue acting at the same time.
Okay.
And so I started auditioning, and it all kind of came together when we had some folks from Third Watch. Remember Third Watch?
I do, yeah. Good show.
Yeah, it was a great show. They came to our precinct. I was a patrolman at the time, and they were doing a ride-along with us. And we got to talking, and I started consulting on that series of episodes they were writing. And they knew I was an actor, and they wrote me a small part in that series arc, and then got me my SAG card. And so right around the time, it all kind of came together. So I pursued acting as much as I could, and then throughout the years, I did it more and more jobs came in.
A new HBO miniseries launches October 25th. It stars Hugh Grant, Nicole Kidman, and Donald Sutherland. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Michael, you're in it too. So tell us about The Undoing and what can audiences expect from this show?
Well, that's the thing. You shouldn't expect anything. It's kind of a challenge to talk about it because it's at the end of the day, it's sort of a classic whodunit, but with a more contemporary style and more modern themes. Essentially, Nicole Kidman plays a psychologist who's leading what looks to be the perfect life. And then someone close to her in her circle is murdered. And little by little, she finds out that the perfect life she's been leading is not so perfect after all. And it's just one revelation after the next and one lie upon lie.
And although it's based on a book, one of the most creative geniuses of our time is the creator, and I'm talking about David E. Kelley. He brought us some very iconic television shows in my lifetime, Doogie Howser, MD, Ally McBeal, Boston Legal, Big Little Lies, the list goes on. Did you get a chance to meet David and work with him one-on-one?
No, surprisingly, I was on set for most of it. He was based in California at the time, and he was, feverishly writing because we got rewrites all the time, and a lot was being pumped out. But I did not see him on set, although he was considered our showrunner. He mostly ran the show from California remotely.
Wow! And you filmed in New York?
All of New York. In fact, New York City is almost like a character in The Undoing. It's quite a backdrop. It's very, very clearly New York.
And can you tell us when this was shot? Was it pre-lockdown and all of that? I mean, has this been wrapped for a while?
It was wrapped for a while. In fact, we shot it it was around March to July of last year of 19. And it was due to be released in May, right, in the middle of the pandemic. And I think with so much production being halted, I think a lot of the networks wanted to space out their content. So The Undoing was supposed to come out in May, and then because of the pandemic, it was postponed. Now slated for October 25th.
Okay, had it come out.
So we were fully wrapped.
Okay, I was gonna say, had it come out in May, we might not even know who the Tiger King is. Maybe it's good timing.
Yes, we were very sidetracked at that time.
We have a lot of young listeners to this podcast because a lot of times we have kids from Disney and Nickelodeon. So I want to chat a little bit about a youngster that's in this new show, Noah Jupe. He is best known for his roles in The Quiet Place and Wonder. Most recently, we saw him in Ford vs. Ferrari. So it seems like child actors, particularly in this decade, really have stepped up their game and are true professionals. Just wondering if that is the impression that you got from Noah as well.
100%. He is really a down-to-earth, very talented, very unassuming young man. In fact, I only had a few scenes with him, but toward the end, we did a week on location upstate New York, and I got to spend some time talking to his mother and more with him. And I really got to know them. They're really a lovely family. And you know what? She's raising him right. You would never guess that he was a child actor. There's no conceit. He's not into his cell phone. He's very personable and he's got a great future ahead of him, as an actor and as a person. Really great kid.
Yeah, and the sequel to A Quiet Place is coming out soon, and he's in that. So pretty excited to see what they do with that.
Totally. He keeps very busy and deservedly. He's very talented.
Now, being a former NYPD and having several police roles on various projects, I often wonder about this. Did you need less coaching because of your background, or do the directors actually have to punch up your acting? Because, a lot of police work, you get to, the television is seeing the most exciting parts, but there's so many down parts. Did they have to punch you up a little bit, or how did that work?
It depends on what the project is. And something like a David E. Kelley project, he's just mastered this genre. So it was mainly just following his script. And the tone of The Undoing is uber realistic. So it was really just a matter of hitting that sweet spot where, and I think one of the reasons I was there because they were looking for that realism. And so, I tried the least acting as possible in terms of, bringing an ultra realistic performance and keeping it very small. The director was very stylistic, and there were some extreme close-ups. And when you're acting to, such an extreme close-up, it's got to be all internal and extremely real. It was actually, finding that delicate balance where you can't look like you're acting. So mainly, and I'm not saying I played myself, because it was a bit of a departure from myself, but it was very grounded in realism and what I've experienced in all my years, with the NYPD.
You were a police officer for a very long time, and you kind of started acting again while you're still working. Now, this didn't instantly come, because I listed at the top of the show a lot of different projects that you were in. And I can't imagine that you just kind of went into the audition room and they're like, oh yeah, book him. Did you go through classes? What was your process to become successful?
Well, a lot of my training was in theater. My degree's in acting and primarily in theater. So once, later when I started to sort of find the bridge to movies and TV, I definitely had to make an adjustment. In fact, it was interesting. Some of my early auditions, I would go in to say, like, a large room and there's a few people at the table. I would find myself acting to the size of the room, when in fact, that's, you don't realize just how close or how far the camera is, and you have to adjust your performance commensurate with the size of the shot. And finally, I had an audition. Actually, it was for Law & Order, and I met with Suzanne Ryan, who was casting at the time. And we got to a conversation. It was just her and me, and we were just talking about life, and it was extremely conversational. And then she went right into the script, and she said, oh, and your lines are what? And I went right from the conversation into saying my lines. So, and that was the first Law & Order that I booked, and one of the first steps in, moving on to larger, more network roles. And it was because I actually at that point realized it's small, it's conversational. Mm-hmm. It's real. You're not playing to a room, you're playing to a camera. One of the things I was fascinated watching Nicole Kidman, and I don't know if she was consciously doing this or if she's just so well trained, but we had some scenes in a very small space, and the camera would start wide. And her performance was, congruent to the size of the shot. And then they'd zoom in and they'd do the same scene, but it's a mid shot. And she would then adjust and find that delicate balance. And then they'd go in for a close-up. And it was amazing to watch. You saw her go fully internal. She took more time to prepare. It was completely in her body, in her eyes, in her soul. It was amazing. And then that's sort of what clicked in me, how much preparation you need to put in to get that sort of outcome. And then also, it's a learned skill, acting for the size of the shot. So I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's one of the things that's taken me a long time to adjust to and to grasp.
And what was it like working with Nicole Kidman? I mean, were you starstruck the first time she walked into the room and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to get it together so I can speak now?
I kind of was. Aside from her, she's larger than life, and she's beautiful, and she's tall, and she's just, when she lights up whatever room or place she's in. So that alone, I was definitely a little starstruck. And I without giving away anything, one of the first things we had shot, my first day on set, I had just met her, and I was still a little starstruck. And then we have to shoot a scene where she's a bit unnerved that the police are now coming into her world. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I shot with her is basically this evil-eyed stare down, from 30 yards away with just a crowd of people around. So and all of a sudden I'm looking at Nicole Kidman, she's looking at me, and she's giving me this evil glare, and I'm giving her an evil glare back. And, I try to stay in the moment, but realistically, I'm like, this is surreal and wonderful, and I can't believe this is happening.
Right. Wow. Well, earlier in our discussion, you did mention 9/11. We're 19 years since that horrific day. And if you don't mind, I just kind of want to go back in time, because you're one of the first people that I've gotten to actually interview that was in New York City on that day, working for the police department. Can you walk us through your 9/11 firsthand experience?
Yeah. It was, I'll never forget, it was election day. It was a beautiful Tuesday. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say about this beautiful Tuesday. And I was due in for election duty. I think I was due in about 1 o'clock. And I watched a lot of it transpire. And then, obviously knowing I was about to go in. So as soon as I saw the first plane hit, I started getting ready and I flew into work. And I didn't go to Ground Zero immediately. I worked in Midtown in sort of the Times Square area. So they sent a lot of the people who were just arriving, they sent us to sort of maybe some of the larger target zones or to the hospitals. So they actually sent me to St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Okay.
So I was kind of stuck there. I felt like I needed to be downtown. So I stayed at St. Patrick's Cathedral for most of the day. And then I got to Ground Zero that night. And, it was nothing heroic. My first duties were bringing supplies from places in Midtown and things like food and other supplies down to the people at Ground Zero. So it was nothing heroic. I didn't pull anyone out. I didn't dig. But I did remain for about 4 months. They kept us there for about 4 months doing things like securing the perimeter, or we were working the bereavement center, or we did do some digging. But by that point, after a few days, they only brought in people with, emergency service skills or construction skills or things like that. So I mainly just guarded the perimeter. So for about 4 months until, I guess we started that new year, I was either at the bereavement center or, unfortunately, the morgue or other targets in that location. So, it was. It's still 19 years later. It's very difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
But in fact, a lot of us, it wasn't until about 5 years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, that I guess our subconscious sort of caught up with us. And a lot of us, I was diagnosed with PTSD, but it wasn't until about 5 years later. I think, we just become numb, and a lot of us just swallow those emotions. So it wasn't just me. It was a lot of my coworkers. It was many years later. And then now it's, a lot of my friends just started speaking about it. We send texts and we call each other on that date, and it's still, it still sticks with us.
Yeah.
It's still very difficult.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another hard thing that you went through being a police officer is that your father actually passed away in the line of duty. Is that right?
Right.
Was it because of him
Right.
that you originally got involved in law enforcement? And how do you cope with even another tragedy like that?
It was a lot for a young kid. He was actually shot when I was just 1 year old.
Oh my!
And he lived for 10 years in a wheelchair. He was paralyzed, and then 10 years later he died from complications due to he still had some bullets in him, some gun. It was a buy and bust that went bad, and so he died when I was 11. I had an older brother, and he from day one wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, and he was very vocal about it. He also became a cop. I didn't see that. I felt very different from a lot of that world, but I guess it I don't know. It is a calling, and I think maybe when I became an adult and when I actually reached adulthood around the age that he was when he was first shot, and then later, when he died, I looked at it on different terms, and I started to deal with it at different levels. You deal with it as an 11-year-old might, and then as a young adult, and then as an adult. And I think, maybe it was something in there that guided me in that direction. It was definitely nothing from my family. They did not push me in any way. In fact, I shocked them when I told them I was thinking about it.
I can only imagine.
But yeah, but I've thought about it, but nothing's come to the surface in that I don't feel like I was finishing a job or anything like that. I mean, I've always wanted to serve my community and to serve the marginalized, and I can think of no one more marginalized or oppressed than a victim over a criminal. criminals are the ultimate bullies. And I always looked at it in those terms. So I think maybe it's just the way I grew up. I was told who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and and that always stuck with me. And I even in the NYPD, I've only known good cops. I don't know the proverbial bad cop. I've never met him. A lot of us we see it on TV like, the rest of the world, and we shake our heads.
Right. Yep.
So for me, it was a noble profession growing up, and it remained a noble profession. And I look back, I left just a few weeks ago after 22 years with my head held high. I have no regrets, and I'm grateful for the experience, and I'm grateful, to have followed in his footsteps. And both he and my brother we think our dad would be very proud of us.
Oh, I think so, especially serving all those years. And now look at you. You're following your dreams. This is actually quite a story you have going. So I hope it just continues to get bigger and bigger.
Thank you.
Now, over the years, I'm sure you've had an opportunity to experience the highs of being on television or the movie screens, being recognized by people in your community or even your coworkers. Do any memories stick out from when you might have been approached by somebody that recognized you for acting, or did you get any sort of recognition at work, or kind of, people picking on you for that? What experiences have you had with people seeing you on screen?
The guys at work are, they bust chops all the time, and they're very good about, very supportive. In fact, my immediate supervisors gave me lots of time off so I can shoot these things. But, there's a couple things that I did that, oh man, it just was a target-rich environment. I was on, remember Limitless on CBS?
I love that show. Yep, the guy with the full brain power, and
I was on that for most of that series. And I played a techie nerd, and there were a couple things that we did, such as, I don't know if you remember, we had a Bollywood dance sequence.
I don't remember, but go ahead.
You're probably good, but it was actually like a dream sequence, but they had all the main characters involved in this Bollywood dance. So before I knew it, I was dressed, in a cross between my work costume and classical Indian attire, and I was Bollywood dancing. So things like that was screenshotted and put up everywhere at work. Yeah,
I can imagine.
So I've had. Yeah, so the guys definitely bust chops, but all in good fun. And I've had plenty of memes made of me, and every time one guy in particular is just, especially when photos of you become readily available, it's sort of like stock photos, and he just takes it and can go anywhere with it. But
right.
The guys at work, they love it. They're very supportive, and they bust chops as you would expect. In New York, a lot of people just, I'll look familiar and say, did I go to college with you, or do I know you from somewhere? And it depends. I'll kind of feel it out, because God forbid I tell them, did I arrest you? I hope that's
you
not
could
the
know
case.
me from several places.
It's I have to tread lightly as to when explaining where they might know me from, but things like, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I did a little guest spot on that, and then New York is so in love with that show. So shortly after that, I did get recognized, and everyone's very supportive. I've had nothing but good experiences.
Well, we talked a little bit about being starstruck around Nicole Kidman. Have you ever been starstruck around any other actors in your career, or who would cause you to be speechless?
I've been very lucky. I've had I had some roles which I interacted with some bigwigs. I was very starstruck, and a role that I had earlier on was a very small role, but it took a long time to shoot. Inside Man, and it was Denzel Washington and Jodie Foster.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I was obviously starstruck with them both the whole time, and I was just fascinated with Jodie Foster in particular. I always thought she was amazing. I'd love to work with her one day as a director, or as acting as well. But definitely starstruck with those two. I'd love to. I've always been a huge fan of The Office, So one day I'd love to work with Steve Carell. I've been a huge fan of his work. And basically, anyone on that show, I would become very starstruck with. I've worked with and met a couple of them. I worked with Brian Baumgartner, and then I met Kate Flannery, and anyone from The Office, you got me. I'm a puddle. I'm
Nice.
very starstruck. Love those guys.
Any interactions with some of the bigger stars that come to mind? Like, did you have any unusual run-ins or anything like that?
Not really. Everyone's been very gracious. I can never say that this person was horrible. I can only say good things about a lot of people. You know who I loved, I thought was great, was Hugh Grant on The Undoing. He was really down to earth. In fact, everyone on The Undoing, notice how I flipped that question around.
Well, we got to keep talking about it. I'm looking forward to the show.
Thank you. And, I may have flipped the question, but for good reason. I've really had good luck, and I've met good people who are extremely outgoing and nothing but good things to say. But Hugh Grant, extremely down to earth, very approachable. In fact, he came up to me and said hello, and then made it a point to call everyone by their name. You could tell that he's been in the business a long time. He's, him, Nicole, everyone on The Undoing. It was just a beautiful experience. Good people.
All right, October 25th, HBO. Oh, I didn't mean to say that there. Before before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about your music, because in the opening we mentioned your first album. You released a lot of songs with some great reviews online. It was called Songs of Valor and Hope. And in your bio that I got, I hear that another music project could be in the works. Is that true?
Yeah. For a long time, I was the national anthem soloist for the NYPD, and I sang at not just national anthems, but I sang at a lot of ceremonies. Okay. So after doing that for a while, I took a lot of those solemn, ceremonial, fairly maudlin songs and put them on a CD. I actually released it, and it did fairly well, surprisingly, because it was just sort of a pet project. And that was 2011. So for 9 years, almost a decade, I've been at work on a second album. And little by little, I've been putting it together, and it's just about finished. I'm just waiting for the right time to release it. I've got so much going on that I want to wait till it's a time where I can focus on it. But it's been my therapy. It's been cathartic. It's been frustrating. It's been wonderful. But it's something I've always been good at, and I just wanted to, focus that talent, and maybe one day I'll be able to, like everything else in my life, merge it all together.
Well, you are one heck of a vocalist. How many tracks will be on that new project? Do you have any idea? Are we talking 5? Or are you talking about a full album?
No, it's a full album. I have 10 songs right now, and then there's about 3 or 4 which I'm still tinkering with. I'm not sure. I might pick one more to add to that, but right now it's 10. And I made a lot of progress during the pandemic because a lot of musicians were home. And it was really cool because nowadays you can just hire a musician remotely. And, I send a bass track, and then I'll send out, the piano track, and someone will send back strings. And then I'll find actually I found a Uilleann pipe player for one song and a pan flute player. So little by little, it's building up the same song. So that's actually what brought the project to a close, because I finally was able to make some progress.
You've got a great acting resume. Your voice is amazing. You have not ruled out Broadway. You live in the right city for it. Now, I know that obviously everything's shut down right now, but what is like a project on Broadway, or what's a show that you wouldn't, you'd kill to be in? Not literally, of course, but...
No, never. I've done theater, but because of the police department, I've never been able to commit to a long-term project, or I could never do theater because, I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, but now I can. So I would love to explore that world. And it was Broadway that got me into it. I saw Les Miserables as a kid and was obsessed. I was bowled over, and I still am to this day. And Les Miserables is the reason I learned how to sing, or learned to sing. In fact, I waited by the stage door, and I asked every actor, "Do you teach voice? Do you teach voice?" And I found this was, I was in high school. I found a great voice teacher through Les Miserables at Dixon.
Oh my gosh!
And then, so I learned to sing in that style. And then, that's what I later was able to bring to the ceremonial unit of the NYPD. And now I'd like to return to singing. And I've got the acting credits and I sing. So it seems like the right next choice. Les Miserables is I think it's only on tour right now, but if it could ever return to Broadway, that would be my dream job. But there's so many good shows on Broadway right now. I couldn't decide. It's too much, too good, but hopefully next year everything will open up again. It's a terrible time. I've got a lot of friends who are full-time Broadway actors, and it's been brutal and it's been sad. I really feel for them. It's been hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully it's soon. Yeah,
those artists in particular, I do think about a lot because we have subscribed to the Broadway series here in Milwaukee for years, and just the fact that those shows aren't touring around anymore, it's like, what are all these people doing to survive and to put food on the table? And
right.
Yeah, I feel for all of those performers who find themselves waiting for things to return because we don't know when that's going to be.
Absolutely. Hopefully it's soon. The other side is here. I hope.
So The Undoing comes out on HBO on October the 25th. You've got that going on.
Right.
Do you have other projects coming up that you want to talk about or anything else that we might have missed asking you about that you want everybody to be aware of?
I got a couple things. I've had a couple projects that may be in the works. I have a small role in it's the Amy Adams movie, The Woman in the Window. And that, too, was postponed due to the pandemic. So that should be coming out soon. I'll see what happens with that. And a few other things which hopefully will pan out once the industry picks up full-time again. But right now I'm focusing on decompressing and enjoying the roller coaster ride of The Undoing.
All right. Last question before I let you go. Tell us, it's not really a question. Michael, tell us where we can follow your career on social media. Where can we keep up with you?
I'm on Twitter. It's at Michael Devine, and I'm on Instagram. It's at Michael P. Devine. And those are the two I'm most active in.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing your personal police stories. We talked about some heavy thing. Got heavy for a little bit. That's why I was like, okay, we got to lighten this up a little bit. But I appreciate you going that direction with us because, it really kind of gives us a full rounded picture of you're not just like on TV and movies anymore. You're not just starring in this upcoming show. You have a whole career that you've kind of built and, just the trials and tribulations of dealing with everyday life of being a police officer is a real thing. And I think we need to draw some more attention to it. So I really do appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your support.
All right. We'll be watching October 25th for you. And thanks again for joining us on Fancounters.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
My thanks to Michael Devine for being on the show this week. I really do appreciate him joining us, telling us about his career, and sharing some great stories. Now, each week, like I said, I'm going to try and introduce some new segments to the podcast, and this week is no exception. I'm going to talk about a podcast I've been listening to for years. It's called The Dave Ramsey Show. If you don't know who Dave Ramsey is, he is one of those financial experts. He talks about getting out of debt, saving for retirement, living your best life, and living like no one else. So later on, you can live like no one else. Live and give like no one else. Anyway, many episodes ago, we had Chris Hogan on the show. He's one of Dave's Ramsey personalities, and I love talking to him about having money in retirement. And over the years, I've learned a lot from Dave Ramsey. But as he gets ready to retire himself, he's been taking more and more days off. And I don't know if you guys listen to the podcast, but this has been driving me crazy. Besides Chris Hogan, I do find the other personalities extremely annoying. And I'm going to tell you why. Ken Coleman comes off with a lot of arrogance. He comes off as a know-it-all. And I get on an expert-driven show where you're taking calls and giving your advice. You should be an expert. It's just his delivery. It's hard to take. Rachel Cruz is Dave's daughter. I just have a hard time taking advice from people who have inherited their success from their parents. I said it. Look at Jack Buck and Joe Buck. Nobody likes Joe Buck, and he's a Hall of Fame broadcaster. But how did he get there? Well, obviously he rode the coattails of his son. Here in Wisconsin, we have a theater chain called Marcus, and the Marcus family goes back generations with movie theaters. But the current guy, Greg Marcus, is annoying. Every time before a movie, he'll come on and kind of give a speech like, "Hi, thanks for coming to the movies. We're glad you're here." I mean, it's almost like he's taking credit for making the movie himself. Movies provide us an escape and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we know. That's why we're here. So people that just ride the coattails of their parents, I didn't have that opportunity. Maybe that's why and I'm not jealous. I'm not. I'm happy with my life. But it's just being in the spotlight for having a famous family, kind of hard. And then they've got a new personality on the show, John Deloney. He's on the show. And the problem I have is John Deloney, anytime he's on the show, if he's co-hosting with somebody, I think he always does. But they spend like the first 10 minutes of the 40-minute show talking, just telling stories and gabbing before they take any calls. And the best part about the Dave Ramsey Show is the guest callers are the stars of the show. And if you're not taking it for a quarter of the show, it's really hard to listen to. I know it's not going well for the show with these replacement personalities because the message boards for the Dave Ramsey Show prove my point. And one of the biggest annoyances for me is when Dave shares his show with a guy named Anthony O'Neill. His expert is going to college debt-free. A great message, something we all should listen to. But the entire show is spent with Anthony just really parroting Dave Ramsey. So, as an example, I've pulled some clips of the Dave Ramsey Show and Anthony just kind of coattailing everything Dave says.
It's the Dave Ramsey Show. I am Dave Ramsey, your host. My co-host today on the air, Ramsey personality, #1 best-selling author, Anthony O'Neill, is with me, being made in India or something. That's pretty cool. I mean, with a high school diploma.
Yes, sir.
And I want to have a good starting position.
Yes.
Way to go!
Let's go.
I'll pay off the debt.
Yes.
So why? That is logical.
Yes.
That's what you want to work towards.
I love it, Dave. I love how you slid that in there.
All right. Well done.
Yeah. Well done. Well done.
A lot of people buying houses right now.
Yeah.
I like cars.
Me too.
They all suck.
Yes.
How are you burnt out?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
I was working like a 20-year-old. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because, man, it is stranger than crud right now, for sure.
It is.
In the old days, we used to call that a forced savings plan. But you obviously are employable.
Yes.
And your skills are what make you secure.
Yes.
And this next point doesn't have anything to do with Anthony O'Neill. Not specifically anyway, but because Dave has a habit of talking over his guest hosts. I pulled a couple examples where Anthony will start saying something even after a long pause, and then Dave just jumps on top and takes over the conversation.
If you got a job, I'll say go buy you a car today tomorrow. I mean, going 30 miles per hour.
I'm just saying, by the end of the week, have this problem solved. That time off doesn't fix that.
Yeah. And Alice, it sounds like
my point is.
And finally, advice for everybody who's podcasting. If you've already put in your 2 cents, please don't put it in again. We heard you the first time.
But I like that. I mean, I think that's a degree that would definitely grow with you and even expand with you.
And to prove my point, 30 seconds later, he says this.
And not just a job, but it's a career field that will grow with you financially.
And I know. I'm picking on a great show. I get that. I love Dave Ramsey. I really do. Just get rid of the co-hosts. They all have their own show. That's the other thing I don't understand. All of these Ramsey personalities have their own podcasts. So why do you have to put them on your show? I just don't get it. Dave Ramsey, you do a great show. You actually take callers. Just do your show, man. We love you. Anyway, that is going to do it for this week on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And next week, we will talk about another podcast that has hit the scene. It's fairly new and maybe shouldn't exist anyway. And yes, I will do podcasts I like as well. Just not next week. Until next week, with another celebrity guest, with more shocking celebrity news of the week, and another podcast discovery of the week, I will talk to you next Friday. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.